Hi, my name is Ivy Clinton, and this is my presentation over Africa's death culture. For my cultural perspective presentation, I will be focusing on the traditional African death culture. I have researched Africa's death culture through our textbook called The Last Dance and an empirical article I found online called The African Conception of Death, a Cultural Implication. Through my research, this is what I found out about Africa's beliefs of death, their death customs, and their attitudes towards death itself. Africans believe in a living afterlife after a person has deceased. The dead will live an active lifestyle in the afterlife as long as they are remembered by an individual or people who still live in the living world. A person named Dominique Zahan explains this concept of the afterlife in our textbook as the newly dead keep the earthward side of their universe updated and on its feet. Then there is a continual disappearance of a part of them, which then become useless because of the weaknesses in the collective memory of them. So, when a person who has died enters the afterlife, they are more lively, since they are remembered more recently. But as time goes on in our living world, the memory of them will fade away and due to that fading memory of them, they will become weak in the spiritual world that they live in the afterlife. So, this is why it's important to the people of African heritage to keep the memory of the deceased souls alive so their ancestors will prosper in their afterlife. The people in Nani, for example, believe that after the memory of a deceased soul is forgotten, their soul will reappear in a newborn child so they continue on their life. There's a lot of different perspectives on this concept of the afterlife, such as some believe that after you are forgotten in the living world that you cease to exist even in the afterlife. But some, such as the Nani people, will believe that they will kind of reincarnate into a newborn child and continue on with their lifespan through that. Death, death is also viewed as a transition of spiritual worlds where a soul will transition from our spirit world to the afterlife spirit world. This is why it's important to respect the deceased in their culture since they will live on beyond this world. It is believed that there is, for example, if For example, if there's a disturbance in the transition of a deceased body to its resting place, the soul will haunt and curse the family it has left behind since they were not respected in the way that they should have been during their transition into their afterlife. A person of African heritage has a mostly positive attitude towards the idea of death since death plays such a big role in their culture. This positive attitude can be shown through music, rituals, and other customs performed during a person's funeral. People of Africa celebrate based on the idea that a soul is transferring to another life instead of focusing on the loss of that person and their life when a person has passed away. Africans see death as a milestone or another step of development in their lifetime, in which a soul goes to another world, which is cause for celebration in their culture. They don't focus on the significance of the death of that person in this life. They focus more on the transition period from this life to the afterlife, since it's just to them, it's just another developmental goal for them in their life. Rituals and customs are extremely important process during the time of the passing of a loved one in African culture. Africans use a term called ancestor worship, which is customs such as sacrifice, prayer, and other actions of respect shown to a deceased person of the community. Ancestor worship shows the soul of the deceased the respect that they deserve as they transition into the afterlife from their community that still live on earth. This type of worship is more of a way of communicating to the dead instead of a rite of passage like other cultures might think. So when they communicate with a person who has passed away, they will communicate just like they're talking to anybody else that's present right in front of them and still alive to this day. It is important to show respect to the dead, not only for the person who is deceased, but also for the living community, so they will not be cursed for the deceased or cursed by the deceased for their disrespect during their transition time period. They will also always acknowledge the presence of that soul, even though they are deceased, which is a form of respect in their culture as well. Africans will perform different rituals for the dead based on what community they are from and how they die. For example, the Papedi tribe that originate from Limpopo believe that when a married man dies, his widow is forbidden to come home after sunset, has to visit neighbors, attend family and community functions during this time, and wear black clothing, and cannot form a romantic relationship for 6 months after the death of their husband in order to respect them during this mourning period. Since Africa is such a big continent, there are so many different communities in Africa that perform different rituals based on how that person died and where that person is originally from. Here are some pictures that I've collected through my research of different rituals performed in different areas of Africa, such as people gathering around the gravesite to communicate with the deceased, people sacrificing a sheep for the deceased, and people playing music to celebrate the soul's transition to the afterlife. Even the customs and rituals might be different based even though the customs and rituals might be different based on the community of Africa you are from, they are all performed to celebrate the transition of the deceased from our living world to the afterlife. So that's the end of my presentation over the traditional African death culture. It was so much fun learning about this type of death culture, and hope that it interests you into researching more about this type of death culture as well. So I've been thinking of questions that maybe I could leave for, like, food for thought for you from this presentation, such as how do you feel about their way of thinking about death and their attitudes towards death as well, and maybe how it differs from your perspective on death? These are the sources that I used during my research, and yeah, thank you for watching my presentation.